Jaehyang So, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon. I am invited all over the world to speak about water, but I couldn't be happier than to join this conference because Saudi Arabia was my childhood home. So I'd like to thank the Saudi Water Authority for inviting me back home to speak with you about this very important topic. As I listened to the fantastic presentations and saw the displays of fantastic innovations during the past 2 days, one thought kept going through my mind. All these innovations need to reach scale as fast as possible because hundreds of millions of people are under water stress. So I'm going to talk to you about scale and how important it is to reach scale and what are the components of having scale. My basic message is that we can't wait to reach scale. Scale needs to be designed from the very beginning. And the example that I'd like to share with you is the Africa Investment Program, which is an initiative launched by the African Union. And the Africa Investment Program is actually a pretty compelling example of scale because while I was presenting this presentation, the chair of the G20, President Cyril Ramaphosa, actually scaled up the Africa Investment Program to the Global Investment Program. So let me invite you to hear his words.
We are witnessing the launch of the Global Outlook Council on Water Investments, which is a G20 presidential
is one of the worst performing SDGs. In fact, it's one of the 5 at the very bottom of the SDGs. So it's urgent that we scale up water investments as quickly as possible, nationally and globally. Now, it's not like the water sector powerful trends, climate change, but also population growth. This graph from the UN shows how fast and rapidly global population is growing. And in fact, if you see the growth rates, steady population will not stabilize until 2084. So the world is not standing still. We must keep running to try and achieve water security. And one of the fastest populations that are growing is in Africa. So it is very clear why the African previous speakers have spoken to why water sector investment is lagging. In this graph, you can see very big investments, $8 billion of investments in 2024 in energy, telecommunications, transportation, and water is in there, but it's at the very top, this tiny blue graph. Water accounts for about 1% of all private investment in infrastructure. Why is it so difficult to invest in water? The global outside the country. But if we want water sector to be sustainable, then capacity must be built at every level. In schools for awareness and training, in organizations for operation, and in science and technology to develop the new future. I live in Washington, D.C., and the Washington, D.C. water, I can say, as a very satisfied customer, the employees of the Washington, D.C. utility are extremely fast to respond. When I call with any sort of a water issue, within minutes, I can actually have somebody call me from DC Water and actually come to my house to make sure that the water system is working. So I was very happy to see the CEO of DC Water to tell him I'm a very satisfied customer. So capacity building is a critical part of ensuring that water investments are robust and sustainable. In 2021, this panel was chaired by heads of state of Namibia, Netherlands, and Senegal, and composed of African Union leaders from all over the continent. So this is a critical component, high-level ownership of this issue. The second is the AIP PETA Water Investment Scorecard. It would be quite surprising that in some countries you would go in to make a water investment, but you couldn't find any of the data, or you couldn't be sure of the reliability of that data. And so, as part of the African Investment Program, a clear water investment scorecard that allowed comparability of the data across the different countries on the continent was developed and maintained. Third, inclusion was quite important. So the theme of gender and climate resilience went through the design and selection of all the projects that would be highlighted as part of the AIP. And in Africa, as you know, there are huge transboundary projects in water that could have enormous dividends for the continent, and then a financing facility to support the financing of all these components. These components actually helped to bring the scale into the Africa Investment Program at the level that Africa needed it. The high-level panel tackled one important question: where is the money to finance water investments? And the high-level panel report yielded what we call the pyramid of water investments, where there were 6 different categories of potential water investments that had not really been tapped. 2 of those categories, which was domestic resource mobilization and gaining sector efficiencies, such as reducing non-revenue water and improving operating efficiencies, accounted together for over 50% of that potential revenue for water investments. The other potential sources were domestic commercial financing, international commercial financing, philanthropic capital, and then you see at the very top just a tiny portion of ODA. So the important message for the Africa Investment Program was that, in fact, the funding stays in the country. There was availability. They did not steps of the AIP. With this demonstration, I think, is why President Ramaphosa concrete pipeline potential. This success, the success of this investment forum was that over $10 to $12 billion of potential water projects was identified during this forum. And I think that really gave the momentum to say, this could be done. In fact, this needed to be done globally. So the Global Outlook Council really scale up the importance of water investments for every single country in the world, using the same key concepts and components that we have actually already seen has worked. The Global Outlook Council is hoped to make some meaningful and significant steps towards building water security for everybody. And you can see that the journey of the Global Outlook Council is needed today more than ever. We need water innovations to be scaled as quickly build water security for today and tomorrow. Thank you.